So I just saw... And it's a big mess, which really isn't a surprise to anybody that's even been remotely paying attention to this movie. From basically the first few trailers, it was pretty obvious that this was gonna be either a colossal failure, disaster, train wreck, whatever you wanted to call it, or just okay. I think pretty much everyone that isn't just like a diehard Venom fan knew that this wasn't going to be a great movie, and I think a lot of people are really just holding out for it to be okay. But after seeing it, it's not great. It's pretty bad. It's not the Catwoman-esque movie that everyone was predicting it would be, or was saying it was after the early reviews, but it is still pretty bad.
I'm Eddie Brock. I'm a reporter. I always seem to find myself questioning something the government may not be looking at. I found something really bad. And I have been... Who said that?
So when I went into this, I really expected it to be the worst superhero movie of the year. I expected it to be, again, Catwoman-esque with just embarrassing visual effects, terrible dialogue, hilariously bad performances, all the stuff that Catwoman has. I kind of expected Venom to have.
You want to do this?
And I will say that I was pleasantly surprised to see that this movie wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was also a little disappointing that it wasn't the worst movie of the year. Because the movie ends up just being kind of a mess. It's not funny, and it's not dramatic. It's just kind of a mess. That's really it. As I watched the movie, I wasn't ever bored by the movie, really, but it does have some major issues, which I'll address in just a minute. But because of this movie's reputation already, I do want to talk about some things I actually liked about it, because I did like some things about it. Everyone's saying that Tom Hardy gives the worst performance of his career in this movie, and I honestly didn't hate him in this. I think there are some moments where he is hilariously overacting.
I don't know.
I think he thought he was making a different movie than what it ended up being, because his performance feels like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man performance, where it's very over the top, it's cartoony, it's a lot of moving around, it's a lot of saying weird things and doing weird things. And I actually didn't mind the duality of Venom and Eddie Brock. I actually did kind of like their relationship that they have. I think near the end it gets a little bit forced, but I liked that they had this kind of communication, and it slowly became, they slowly kind of bonded in a way. They slowly became one with each other and sort of learned how to work together instead of just having the symbiote be the main drive of Eddie. So I kind of liked that. The direction by Rubens Fischner is actually not bad. I think he gives it his all. Everyone knows Zombieland, everyone likes Zombieland, and he did a decent job with that, and he definitely seems like he's improved as a filmmaker from Zombieland to Venom. I think he actually doesn't do a bad job with this movie. I think most of the shots are composed pretty well. A lot of the shots are blocked pretty well. Everything's in focus, which is great, but that's it. The movie's a mess, and I would say there are 4 major things that are holding this movie down. 1, the pacing. 2, the tone. 3, the main villain, Riot. And 4, the structure. And that's a lot of major issues with the movie that are kind of pillars that you need in a superhero movie, and it fails on every single one of those.
What do you want from me?
You will find out.
I'm so sorry. We cannot just hurt people.
And we'll talk about them in order here. Number one, the pacing. The pacing of this movie is very bad. I think a lot of that is contributed to the editing, of which it seems like they are just slapping scenes together with a reckless abandon. A lot of the scenes don't work together a lot of times. There's a scene when Eddie Brock, after he gets dumped from his news company, goes into this convenience store and then just starts talking to himself. And he's like, as a reporter, I'd have to hide in plain sight. And I was like, who's he talking to? It doesn't ever establish that there's someone there with him or that somebody followed him in. And so it just seems like he starts talking to himself. And then he goes around the corner and he's like, but you suck at hiding in plain sight. And I'm like, what? It just didn't make any sense. And there's a lot of scenes like that where like continuity is just blatantly wrong, or it's cut to death and you don't know what's happening and you can't follow the logic of a scene. And that contributes very heavily to the bad pacing of this movie. The first 30 minutes, not much happens. Basically, Eddie Brock is a reporter. He gets in with Carlton Drake, I think's his name, played by Riz Ahmed, who is the CEO of this massive company who has the symbiotes, and he's testing the symbiotes on people. And Eddie Brock goes and does an interview and accuses him of killing people, and Riz Ahmed ruins his life, and we see all of this happen, and then it cuts to 6 months later, and then he's doing okay. He just doesn't have a girlfriend or a job, but he has an apartment somehow, and he knows everyone on the streets, and everyone likes him, which is weird. And then from there, he gets a call from somebody on the inside at the Riz Ahmed's company, and he goes in to investigate. Venom attaches to him. They have some quirky banter, they have some action scenes, and then there's a fight scene at the end with Riot, and then the movie's over. It's a big mess that I'll go into a little bit later when I talk about the structure, but the pacing is, in the first 30 minutes specifically, is just snail slow. It is so boring. The first 30 minutes of this movie are so boring. It goes all over the place, and yet it feels like it's going nowhere, and I felt like it could have just picked up after that 6 months later title card. If it just picked up after that and went from there, I think the movie would be better, because you get this whole backstory and it doesn't even really matter, and it takes forever to set up. When it really starts to pick up is when Venom actually gets introduced, because again, I liked their dynamic, but it takes so long to get there. It takes so long to get there that it's infuriating at a certain point.
Look into my eyes, Eddie. The way I see it. We can do whatever we want. Do we have a deal?
So number two is the tone. Like I said, I like Tom Hardy in the movie, but it feels like he doesn't know what he's making, because the movie seems like it's going for this dark, serious tone, sort of similar to The Dark Knight, and yet it has a incredibly goofy, over-the-top central performance and an incredibly goofy, over-the-top central character in Venom. I don't know how to describe him.
Eyes, lungs, pancreas, so many snacks, so little time.
But you get these two performances from Venom and from Tom Hardy that are weird, they're over the top, and they're campy in the middle of this dark, serious movie about people dying and people losing their job and the world being terrible. So it's this tonal inconsistency that just clashes with itself so hard, and it makes Tom Hardy's performance look really bad in comparison to like Michelle Williams or to Riz Ahmed, who are playing it very straight. And then Tom Hardy's over in the corner going... Number three big problem with the movie is Riot, who is the main villain. Riot is established in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then he doesn't actually show up as Riot until the last 10 minutes of the movie. He inhabits this, like, EMT, and then you see her walk off, and then it cuts to something completely different, and then randomly throughout the movie, it will just cut back to Riot just walking around, inhabiting new people, and walking somewhere else. For the first hour, it cuts back to him maybe 4 times, and he's just walking around. If you want to have a villain, you need to set up motivation, you need to set up character, you need to know who they are, and for the first hour, you don't know anything because he is literally just walking around in an Asian person's body, a small child's body, and another Asian person's body, and doing absolutely nothing. So the villain in this movie is awful. So whenever the movie cuts to him, I just wanted to gouge my eyes out. And then when he fights Venom at the end, it's the most Transformers-like action scene. Just can't tell what's happening. There's lots of loud noises, people get hit, things fly around, and you can't tell what's going on, and it's all very loud. And then Riot gets beat by exploding, and then that's it for him. He's literally in less than 10 minutes of the movie, and most of that time is spent with random characters you never meet or care about walking around. Who thought this was a good idea? If you didn't want to have a main villain, you didn't need to have a main villain. But why force him into the movie in these awful cutaway scenes that feel completely out of place with the rest of the movie? Who thought this was a good idea?
That power, it's not completely awful.
You have no idea how much you're scaring me right now.
Eddie, cooperate. And you just might survive.
That leaves me with only one bullet point to hit on my major flaws list, and that is the structure. And this contributes or correlates with all 3 of my other flaws. The structure is a complete wash. There isn't any rhyme or reason to things that happen. The movie just kind of does whatever it wants until it ends. There isn't anything that really happens in the movie. The first 30 minutes establish that Eddie Brock's a reporter that's disgraced. The next 30 minutes establish that Venom and him are going to be friends in a weird way. And then the last 30 minutes, Venom fights Riot, kills him, and then the movie just ends. I always harp on the Marvel movies for having the same structure in every single movie, but at least there is one. You gotta have at least something, and Venom just doesn't. It just banks on an audience liking the character already and then just seeing it because of that. That's literally all that Venom has going for it, is that it's banking on people to already know and like the character. You don't learn anything about him, you don't know why anything is happening, and you certainly don't care. All the characters suck because you don't know what the motivations are. And then near the end, you find out what Riot wants, and turns out that Riot wanted to get on the spaceship that Riz Ahmed made so that he can launch himself into space and bring down more symbiotes to assimilate the world. That's his motivation that you learn with 15 minutes left in the movie. 5 minutes before he gets killed. You learn about what Riot wants right before he dies. So what's the point? What is the point of this movie? There is no logical reason or point to this movie being made other than Sony wanting a hit. Because Sony has dropped the ball on literally every superhero movie they've attempted since Spider-Man 3 in 2007. Sony cannot buy a hit because they're just rushing out these garbage scripts and then slapping them on some random independent director that they dredge up to try and make it. But it feels so cynical. The movie feels like all it is going for is to make some money. There is no other reason for this to exist. And it shouldn't have existed. And for all of these reasons, I'll probably give it a 3 out of 10. That's all I can say. Venom sucks. It's a disaster of a movie. It's a complete wash, and nobody should go waste their time with it. It's 2 hours of your life that you will watch pass by completely passively and then forget about in about an hour. don't go see it. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Don't give this movie money. Don't give Sony any reason to keep up this bad behavior. God, it's just the worst.